Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another edition. I want to talk today about something that I certainly haven't done a podcast on. I don't even think I've written a column on this. So let's get into it. What I've noticed is that among people that have accumulated enough of a nest egg to pass on, and it's not about the dollar amount here, it's about the passing on. My experience is that there's just not a lot of thought given to whom a person will bequest the money. It's generally a foregone conclusion that any money I have, any inheritance that I want to pass on, will go to my children or my grandchildren. There seems to be like a societal money script around leaving an estate in the U.S. that says good parents leave all their money to their kids, and that the more money I can leave to my kids, the better off they'll be. So it's not surprising that there's usually no thought or discussion on how to pass on an inheritance in a manner that doesn't harm the kids, because the thought is, well, giving money is good. And even more rare, if ever, is there any discussion on leaving money philanthropically or to organizations or charities. It stands to reason, with the expectation that any inheritance be left to kids, that very few wills that I have ever seen contain any philanthropic intention. And I found some research on this that was pretty interesting. It was done by Professor Russell James. He's an attorney and also a CFP that taught at least he still may teach at Texas Tech University. The research came from January 1st, 2014. That's why I say that. And it's called Neuroimaging and Charitable Bequests. And his research found that the number of people over age 50 with a gift to charity included in their wills is between 5 and 6%. Now, well, that's reasonably low if you consider that only 1/3, 33% of U.S. adults even have a will, and that's according to Caring.com's 2021 Wills and Estate Planning Survey. If you do the math on that, it means 98 to 99% of all U.S. citizens are not including charitable giving when they pass. So when you consider that leaving money to children in a way that doesn't cause them harm is often difficult, this is puzzling. What do you mean, leaving money to children in a way that doesn't cause them harm? Well, according to a New York Times article, Thinking About Giving Money to Adult Children, think again, that kind of says it all. Legal experts and estate planners caution parents to carefully scrutinize need that children have for money and how it could affect their long-term ability to live, work, and succeed in the world. Christina Baltz in that article said, you want to support your child, but if your child is just serially not self-sustaining, what do? This is a real dilemma. Money is a metaphor for love and control. So, of course, this left me wondering about the psychological and emotional mandates from society, from, those parts of ourselves that just believes that's a given, left me wondering about those mandates, and especially in the light that it might harm them. And why then don't people even consider charitable bequests? What's behind the motivations? What are the money scripts about that only focus on giving money to related heirs? Well, according to Professor James, most people don't give gifts or leave money to people or causes that they don't have an emotional connection with. People who are not part of their life story. He found that there are two factors that need to be present for someone to give money. And I think this is probably both alive or dead. But the first must be that the beneficiary must share the perspective of the giver. And I interpret perspective to be the goals and values of the giver. That's number one. The second that also must exist is that the giver must have empathy for the beneficiary. If those two criteria don't exist, then there is no gift. I found that fascinating. And when I look at my giving, my intentions, say around either giving while I'm alive or giving when I pass on, I find those really align. So then James tested different marketing messages for their ability to increase a person's willingness to leave a gift to charity with over 4,000 respondents. Those most motivated to include a charity in their wills were those where gifts would continue their life story and impact the world long after their death. So it was visualizing the continuation of their life stories that was important. And this fits with what he calls the visualized autobiography concept. And by that, he says, when donors are considering leaving a bequest to charity, the most important question that they tend to ask themselves is, which charity or which cause is part of my life story? So it's compelling stories that make it easier for a giver to visualize a gift as part of his or her life story. And this is the psychological motivation playing out when a parent visualizes giving to a child. I mean, a child typically has been pretty central to their life story. And typically, children will share similar goals and values. And even being part of their lineage, right? Their legacy. This is something that a parent typically wants to see continue. So we see both of these factors are present in just the automatic inclination to leave everything to children. The problem, of course there's a problem, right? Is that this visualization of leaving a child money because they share the parent's values and the parent feels empathy for them might be more of an extreme belief. Okay? How is that possible? What do you mean? Well, there is no questioning on the part of the parent whether giving money is harmful or helpful. It's a foregone conclusion that leaving someone money is positive and helpful. There's no thought that, maybe the money could be a very negative and hurtful gift. Now, if you think about it, this could be like a person that holds my values as part of my life story, for whom I feel great empathy for. It's like giving them a poisonous snake. Now you're probably thinking, good grief, Rick. This sounds kind of extreme, kind of ludicrous thinking. I don't think so. We have a money script that money's good. Giving money is good. And we know that money is not good and it is not bad. It is whatever the person does with it. So let me give you an example of this in a story. This whole thing reminded me of a client who I'll call Pam, not her real name, who was really struggling with how to leave money to her children. She was pretty distressed about this. She and her late husband had spent a lifetime as entrepreneurs in a profession that they were really passionate about, really felt it was giving back to the world. And it also amounted or resulted in them accumulating a sizable estate of, at the time, about $25 million. And her husband had recently passed away and had left the whole estate to her. Pam and her husband had 3 children from their marriage. And as she talked, each child shared very different worldviews from each other. Her oldest child, which I will call Jared, not his real name, shared her and her husband's entrepreneurial values. He was a calculated risk taker and had started a business and was very successful in that business. Good money manager. Her second child, whom I will call Laura, not her real name, was a college professor. And being a college professor, she shared more progressive views, more progressive values, and viewed capitalism as somewhat of a flawed economic model, something that needed fixing, and really embraced more European values of more controlled capitalism, high taxes, and a broad safety net. Her third child, Alex, not his real name, was a community organizer, and he held capitalism, socialism, and governments in disdain. He also embraced societal revolution economically and adopting something that she called, and that I've learned more about since then, called the gift economy. And this is an economy where goods and services are not bought or sold, but they're freely given. It's a fascinating idea, but not highly practical, at least in today's society. So she was pretty conflicted about leaving her estate to her kids. She said Jared and Laura were responsible with money. They shared her values around frugality, but that Alex was a spendthrift. She said that money just went through his fingers like water. I asked her how her relationship was with her kids. She says, I get along good with all of them, but with 2 of them, I don't talk about politics or the economy. But as she talked, she was really extremely conflicted around leaving money to Alex. And she said, he just despises the economic philosophy of capitalism. And that was the genesis. That was the creative foundation of what my husband and I were able to accumulate. Without that, we wouldn't have accumulated this. and that all of this comes from this foundation, and that we really have nothing in common when it comes to economic or political philosophy. We don't share the same values. Remembering back to the research that says that's number one in giving. But she said she was certain that any money that she would leave him would go to fund a lifestyle and causes that she didn't support. On the other hand, she says she felt pretty happy to leave money to Jared, who did share her same economic and political values, and that she thought anything she left to him would support that. And she was lukewarm about leaving Laura money, but she didn't really have any hesitations about leaving an equal amount to her. So she wondered, in asking me if she could leave Alex nothing and leave her estate to Laura and Jared, which at that time was $12.5 million each. She said, I feel a lot of guilt about that, but it just doesn't feel right to give money to someone who basically despises the very economic system from which it comes. Well, that's a tough question to answer. I told her that most parents treat their offspring equally, mostly to avoid sibling rivalry about one being treated differently. Like I said, I honestly never had run into a situation like this. I decided to ask her about any charities or organizations that she was involved in, and she immediately lit up and started talking passionately about her and her husband's life's work. There were several organizations she mentioned in her story, many professional, that they belonged to and were very active in. You could tell she just had a palpable emotional connection with these organizations as she related her stories about everyone and what they meant in her life and her involvement in them. So I asked her what I thought was an obvious question. Had she ever considered leaving a bequest, a gift in her will to any of them? It certainly seemed that they embraced her values and would continue to influence the causes that she was passionate about. I remember she paused, had this just shocked look on her face, and she says, no, it really never occurred to me. I asked her, well, how would it feel to you if you did? She says, actually, it would feel amazing. Now that's how deep these money scripts go of you will leave money to your kids. It just had never occurred to her. And quite frankly, I think this is a lot more common than we would ever think. So we worked together, and in the ensuing months, looked at a lot of possibilities and things she could do. And so she decided to modify her will, and she gave several of her IRAs and annuities to an endowment fund that she established with a local donor advised fund. That the short for that is a DAF. Now, I live in Rapid City, South Dakota, and our local DAF is called the Black Hills Community Foundation. And so she set that up as her beneficiary, and then she put on file with the DAF her instructions as to how she wanted these funds managed. And she decided to leave some outright gifts to some of them. And then she decided to set up what's called an endowment fund, where 5% of the fund would be given to support scholarships and various gifts to various projects and things every year. And she was pretty happy with that. And that even makes more sense today, because now, since this happened, the Secure Act passed, and 100% of an IRA must be taken out within 10 years, which would cause a taxable event on the part of whoever received it. So these are wonderful things today, both annuities and IRAs, to give to a charity, because of course they won't pay the taxes on them. So the gift is even more magnified, right, by the amount of the taxes. If you gave $1 million to a kid that's in the 40% tax bracket, let's say they unfortunately don't live in a state like South Dakota with no income tax, they could pay 45 to 50% in taxes. Well, on $1 million, that's $400,000 or $500,000. If you give it to charity, you have $400,000 or $500,000 more that she gave. Today, she's considering doing some additional gifts of highly appreciated real estate and stocks to a trust that would pay her an income during her life. So she wouldn't be waiting till she had died to do this, but she would give those away today, and then she would get an income for life in doing this. And then upon her death, they would go to this same DAF that she had set up. So the result of all this is, instead of leaving 100% of her estate to her children and to just 2 children, she decided to leave 12% of her estate to her kids, which is about $1 million each. She was also concerned, I mentioned in the start of this, that will this money help or hurt? And she decided $1 million each would probably not be enough to really hurt them, but enough for them to do something that would bring them some joy around. So Jared and Laura would get, or upon her death will get, their $1 million each outright. Alex's share, though, was more problematic. She was concerned about him blowing through the money immediately, and maybe using a lot of that for a cause she didn't support. So she decided to leave that in trust that would pay out 3% a year. And we haven't talked a lot about the podcast about withdrawal rates because it's such a financial question or issue, retirement planning issue. But 3% a year withdrawal rate should mean that the money lasts for a long time, 30 plus years. So that would be $30,000 a year that Alex would get, and she felt that's enough to give him a foundational income, but he can't get at the trust for any more than that. And then upon his death, it would go to the donor advised fund. So that is how she addressed this real struggle she had, and really brought her estate giving into alignment with her goals and values, and yet did it in such a way that it wouldn't be harmful for her children, and kind of found a happy medium, especially with Alex, that she really struggled with. So Pam's still alive. I don't know the end of the story. She's not 100% happy with her estate plan, but she's way more at peace with it today. So this is just an example of how one person kind of put all of this into being, into play. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. Maybe you've gotten a couple insights on yourself or your clients' giving. The psychology around the giving I just thought was fascinating, which were those two factors. We give to people that share our values, share our perspective, and that we're emotionally connected with. So, thanks for listening. I look forward to chatting at you. I wish we had a dialogue next week. And by way of dialogue, if you have any thoughts or comments on any podcast, please reach out to me at rick@rickkahler.com. Take care. Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.